Morning, everybody. We're going to kick off the Finance Committee meeting. Today we have a hefty agenda full of data, so we're going to jump right into it. First, I know before we started this meeting, I do want to welcome Dan Coleman. Dan will be joining the district on Monday, and he will be joining us as the Assistant Business Administrator. So we are lucky to have him in this meeting today. I'm very excited for him to get started and to join not only this district, but the business office team and hit the ground running. So welcome, Dan. All right, so we're gonna get into the agenda. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me 1 second. Just let me know if you can all see this.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. And I will apologize up front. I'm actually at home today because I'm headed to Western PA after this for a funeral service this weekend. So if you hear my dogs in the background because they get barky sometimes, I do apologize up front. So all right, so you can see from our agenda, we have 4 agenda items. So we're going to start just with the bus purchase update. If you remember from the last meeting, I had Mr. Bray here. We talked about 2 replacements that we were requesting at the last meeting. We were still waiting on pricing to come in. We weren't sure if it was going to be available in time for the March board meeting for approval, and it was not. So this is just kind of just a quick refresh that we discussed this at the last meeting, and we were just waiting on pricing. That pricing did come in. The actual cost per vehicle is 184,678. We had identified that there was going to be a range between 180 and 200,000. So we were a little bit nervous with everything that's going on with tariffs and how that would impact costing. We thought it was going to edge up more towards the $200,000, but it came in closer to the lower end of that range that we thought it was. As you will see, this number is a little bit higher than the last time we purchased buses. So we are creeping up, and that is just an impact of the economy. So, but again, I just wanted to reiterate there is no tariff pricing on these numbers that you are seeing here. So we're going to request to move forward at the April 22nd board meeting for the approval of the purchase and replacement of the 2 buses that you see on the screen. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so and that's firm at this point?
Yeah, so that is the actual quote. That is the number that we're locked into.
Okay, and then what's the timeline for delivery? And I
We are
apologize.
still looking at a lag of anywhere between, I would say, 12 months plus, 12
Okay,
to 18 months. So right now, I believe the 2005 Bluebird will no longer be on the road. The 2009 will still be on the road.
okay. Yeah, I drove by a broken down bus just this week.
So, and then you'll see on the bottom, and as we discussed at the last meeting, there will be a full review of the district's bus fleet replacement schedule at the next property committee meeting when we start to get into the capital 5-year plan, which we worked on that assessment with CHA, who is formerly Dewey. So we will have an in-depth discussion and a greater look at our bus fleet replacement. Okay. No questions. I will move on to the next agenda. I want to talk about the bond sale process and the results that happened. Dr. Yannicone kind of gave a little teaser at the groundbreaking ceremony for all the board members that were in attendance there. So I just want to talk about the process. We went out, this was our second phase for the middle school project funding. We're doing 3 phases. So this was phase number 2. So we got the authorization to proceed at the February 10th Finance Committee meeting. I had a bond rating call on March 10th, and the report was received on March 20th. It was not a huge surprise. They've been talking to us the last few rating calls about our use of fund balance over the last few years and the need to kind of try to close that gap and have a balanced budget. So there was the possibility of us getting downgraded with our bond rating, and that did happen this last time. That we went from an A+ negative outlook to a AA stable outlook. We are still in the top tier of strength and bond ratings. So we weren't sure what impact this was going to have on what we were seeing when we went out to bid. But as you will see on the results side, and I'll get into that in a minute, it had very minimal impact to the bond sale results. They also, when they downgraded our AA plus to a AA, they took off the negative outlook. That negative outlook was due to strong fiscal management. They still consider our reserves, even though we have used them the last couple years, as very strong and healthy. And then the other thing is there's a comparison of districts and companies that they consider our peers and the amount of debt that they're carrying. So those are some of the impacts that or variables that impact our rating and what the panel looks at when they're making this decision. So one of the things that was very positive is that they got rid of the negative outlook because that could have carried down, and they put us with a stable outlook. So it's still a very strong rating. One of the things that we've said has been our goal is to make sure that we are trying as hard as we can to try to just close that gap between with our deficit spending, which we have been working very hard to do while still moving forward with, all of the things that we're doing in our district, all the replacements that we're doing, the projects that we're doing, just to keep going with the programs that we have and to continue strong within our district. So I think we're doing a good balance of that, and that was reflected in the bond results that we'll see. So there were three companies that bid. There were three bids that were received, and the low bid interest rate was 4.47 and some change. You'll see the ranges was that low bid to 4.85 and some change. One of the things that Jamie Doyle indicated to me was that obviously the market right now is a little bit uncertain. I'll use that word from day to day. So when we went into for our bond sale, that range, she said, indicates the uncertainty that the market conditions have, but the rates are still very favorable. We did not have to have bond insurance. That's one of the things that when you come out of that tier, that top tier that I was talking about with our AA rating, as you get lower into the single A's, you have to pay bond insurance on your bond, which increases the price. Also, when you see as you go down to the single A piece, you'll see that those interest rates are very different. So favorable interest rates, it yielded an overall savings of a little over 2 million for the life of the bond based upon what they had originally projected. And we had an annual savings for the 25-26 annual debt service budget of a little over 123,000. So still a very, very favorable and strong bond sale. Any questions?
Yes. First of all, great job on on the actual bond sale. Those numbers look really good and favorable versus what we expected. So nice job. Can you just remind us who's actually doing the report? Who is the panel? And then follow up to that, if you could just restate, if we want to improve our bond rating for the future, like are you clear on what we should actually be focusing on in the finance process for the annual budget? And are you going to be making that explicit in these next rounds of discussions?
Sure. So first, I'll answer the first question. It's Standard and Poor is the rating agency that does our bond rating. So what happens is you have to have a fresh bond rating review 6 months within the 6-month time period of borrowing funds. So you know that we go on an annual basis because we do bank qualified bonds to keep us at that lower interest rates, the better callable dates. So we usually do around this time. It's usually around March or April when we go out for bond sales. So 24, we went 23, that was for the other projects and starting the middle school project, but 24 was solely for the middle school project. So we've been pretty consistent through these last couple years of going through this process. So one of the things that the bond rating agency looks at is they look at a host of things. They look at development within the township. They look at where your millage rate is, what your taxing capability is. They look at use of fund balance and what that looks like. And so one of the things that we've had a goal, and it says here, continuing to close the gap between expenditures and revenues. That is one of the things that we are going to work towards. And that is, I think that for me is an asterisk that I think will be a positive thing in trying to get back up to that A plus rating. I mean, we want to get it back up to the A plus rating, but we also want to have a stable outlook. The other thing is just managing the amount of debt that we are carrying and paying that off and as that comes down. So it's managing the projects, it's managing what we're doing long term. Those are all going to be addressed. So one of the things that I'm wrapping up and then coordinating with Mr. Watley are two things. One is the budget projection module that was purchased this year. So I'm wrapping up with Forecast 5. So that'll be something that gets rolled out, which, will be very helpful for them to see what our forecasted outlook is. And then the other thing is having a very solid 5-year capital plan. So I think with the addition of those two things, and again, the report, and I will share this information with the committee so that you can read the report and see what they said, but it was very favorable. It was, it was very strong management skills, very strong budgeting practices. It's just closing that gap in the deficit spending, and being stable with that. They like to see, not using fund balance and raising taxes as high as you can. So they're a little bit opposite as opposed to what we are trying to do when we are presenting budget and making sure that we have local effort and we're being respectful of taxpayer dollars. So it's trying to balance that on both sides when it comes to our bond rating. But again, we are in the top tier. It's still a very, very strong rating.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we will move on to our proposed final budget presentation. This will be tag team between myself and Dr. Yannicone. So we'll be bouncing back and forth with the information that we are relaying. So I don't think we need to go over this. Again, you guys hear me ad nauseum, I think, through this process that I like to have repeater slides so that as people ask you questions, you are very well versed in being able to say, what are our guiding principles when administration is preparing budget and presenting it to the board? I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Yannicone.
Thank you, Kara. Good morning, everyone. We wanted to just begin by reminding the members of the committee where we have been spending our funds in the current budget cycle, which we are almost ready to close out. It's hard to believe, but that's where we are. So I'll begin with curriculum and instruction. Just briefly, you can see some of the program areas where we've spent funding this year. In particular, I want to highlight K-6 ELA. That was a significant purchase of the district to overhaul the entire elementary and early middle language arts program. And at Academic Affairs on April 23rd, I will have a report on the successes we're seeing out of the core knowledge language arts program, the CKLA program that we purchased. But again, that was a significant financial commitment of the district, along with the other areas that you see here. In addition, under staffing, we added an elementary health teacher. That is having a really positive effect. In the fall, our elementary health teacher was at Enfield, and in the spring, she's currently at Erdenheim. And we're getting really positive feedback from families, from students, about the learning experiences they're having as a result of our addition of elementary health, which you may or may not recall was an area of standards that we were not meeting prior to last year, and really wanted to make sure that we did a better job in meeting those standards. So we're very happy with that new program. In addition to that, we've added a high school guidance counselor, and that's increased our students' access at the high school to counselors. And we've seen some positive benefit of that as well. You may recall September was the deadline for the use of all ESSER 3 funding. ESSER 3 has been in the news recently in that there are a number of districts in Pennsylvania and across the country who requested extensions on their use of ESSER 3. We were not one of those districts. And we were able, through Kara's terrific management of the budget, we were able to absorb those 4 additional positions that we brought in following the pandemic. And we've seen great benefit in having the 2 additional special education teachers and the 2 math specialists at the elementary level. One is stationed at Enfield and the other at Erdenheim. So we're seeing good growth in those areas. In addition, we've added our supervisor level support at transportation. Our technology supervisor was a shift in the position from what was formerly a confidential position into a full supervisory role. And then we have several continued areas of growth in student activities through the National Junior Honor Society at the middle school, the Strings program just getting started at the middle school this year, Global Scholars at the high school, which is a world language enrichment program, and we started the formal PIAA level volleyball program at the high school with a head coach, and a very successful first year. More on that later. In technology, we've continued to upgrade and update our technology devices, our one-to-one devices this year at K2. We replaced all of our laptops across the district for every teacher on staff. We're in the process of upgrading our phone systems, continuing our cybersecurity plan. And as you know, we made a major shift in our core system with PowerSchool taking the place of eSchool. And then in facilities, we're going to talk about facilities in more detail at the property committee meeting on April 29th. But we are continuing to maintain and upgrade systems and programs. For example, the middle school track and field program, you can see the growth that we are in the midst of hopefully finalizing. We need, in order to finalize that project, we need a week above 40 degrees from dawn to dusk, and it's not happening just yet. So soon we will see a rubberized surface on that high jump area, and we'll finish up with some sod. But right now the weather is not cooperating, so we'll get there. And as Kara mentioned, the bond issuance was the other advantage of this year's budget. So we hope that the community and the finance committee will feel that we've made good use of this year's budgetary resources.
Okay, so I just did a snapshot and a good visual of where our 24-25 revenue sources stem from. As you can see, and I go along with all of the school colors, so I do my best to do that with the blues and the grays. So the big blue pie, that represents our local revenue, and that's about 80% of our funding that we receive for our operating budget. State, and that's comprised of primarily state local property taxes. Another big piece of that is earned income tax proceeds. And then another big thing that we had is while the market has some volatility in it as of late, interest rates were great. We did a great job of investing funds. So we were able to capitalize on the great interest rates for investments, short-term investments this year. So that's another big pie piece of that. At the state level, we're at about 19%, and you'll see at the federal level, we're at 1%. You'll see more information later in this presentation that breaks down that information to show how those numbers are going to change a little bit as we're heading into the 25-26 budget year. This next slide is how our funding was allocated for this current budget year and how we support the needs of our districts and what the priorities are. So you'll see that the lighter blue, the 2 pie pieces, instruction and support services, that is really everything that goes into educating our children. Instruction is the direct instruction. That is direct teaching and learning. That is what happens in the classroom. So that's resources, that is personnel, that's everything that goes on to support classrooms. The support services are administration, it's counseling, it's nursing, it's all the support services that are offered in order to enhance the direct instruction that happens in the classroom. So you'll see that 85% of our budget is geared towards that piece of it, as it should be. And then you have the smaller pie pieces. I had to veer off the grays and the blues, but I thought it was very fitting for debt service for it to be green, because that represents money. So our debt service, that makes up about 13% of our budget, maybe a little bit less. Something that happened recently, a GASB, that's the financial oversight that we have to follow. There was a GASB pronouncement where we had to shift where we recognized our leases. So that number is a little bit higher than just our debt service number because it also includes all of our technology leases and our copier leases. So that's just a shift of where that money was allocated in previous years. And then non-instructional activities represents our student activities and our athletics. So that gives you an idea of how our money is distributed throughout the district this current year. Any questions on those two slides? No? Okay. Budget process timeline, this is not new. You see it again at nauseum. So we're at April 11th. You're seeing the proposed final budget presentation. Out of this meeting, we are looking for the approval of the proposed final budget at the school board meeting on the 22nd, with the hopes that there is no change between that time period and June 3rd, which we'll be looking for our final budget approval from the board. As you know, the state requires us to go through a couple of kind of check the boxes with board approval, and this is one of them. So that's what's upcoming in our budget process timeline. This is not new either, but I will let Dr. Yannicone speak about under the business office and human resource department, creating the personnel budget and kind of a process that we have put in place that has been reflective in the 25-26 staffing.
Thanks, Kara. So the third bullet under the business office and human resource department, creation of the personnel budget. I believe I mentioned this at our last finance meeting, but just to remind the committee, we are, every time we have a resignation or a retirement, reviewing the position in detail to determine whether or not we need the position or could restructure or reallocate the position. That has not been something in the last few years that we have felt the need to do in the detail that we are doing currently. But given some of the other factors related to the budget, which we'll explain shortly, we have felt that we needed to be a little bit tighter with regard to our staffing. Staffing is the largest component of the budget, as Kara mentioned a few minutes ago. And so we're trying to really make sure that every position is needed at this time and is directly benefiting students, and can't be, again, restructured in a way that continues to benefit students but saves the district funding. So we'll continue to work in that area, and hopefully, you know, again, as you'll see as we move forward in the next few slides, our goal is not in any way to negatively impact student programming, but definitely to maximize the efficiency of our staff.
Thank you. So this is a slide that we put in. This is hot off the presses. This information was released literally yesterday. So I thought it was important to include it, and just showing where inflation rates are right now as of March of 2025. We're at about 2.4%. As you know, inflation rates impacts the cost of goods and services. This is a slightly lower number than in previous presentations. One of the things that it highlighted was that this number came down slightly because it was attributed to lower annual gas prices. That is what was reported out. However, the other big thing that it did note, and it was a big asterisk, that it reflects the rates, the inflation rates, before the talks of tariffs went into place. So looking out into the future, if the tariff talks continue and they are followed through on, there's concerns that these tariffs that are imposed, they will increase the inflation rate in the coming months. So we want to keep an eye on that. That's why I thought it was important that we take a peek at this right now. But just a quick slide. And then the job market remains competitive with continued impact rates on our substitutes, custodial, and security services. Those are our contracted services that we have within the district. So we're going to get into the meat of some federal and state education funding. This is, I couldn't put any pretty pictures on this because it's a lot of information, a lot of words, and I know that, but I think it's very important. And I will kind of bounce back and forth with Dr. Yannicone on this slide. So Dr. Yannicone, please feel free to jump in at any time. I know the next one you will be talking a lot on as well. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show everyone how does the federal and state funding currently support our needs? Because there's been a lot of talk about funding at the federal level, and then there's also, we don't know how that's going to impact the state level. So one of the things I wanted to do was show when the budget cycle for both of those government entities happen. So one of the things that I think is very important to note is the federal budget, that cycle runs September to August. Why that's important is because normally the state, they're passed by June. Sometimes that has not happened, but their budget cycle is July to June, which is the same as ours. So our budget is shored up and approved by June 30th. So that gets enacted and put in place July 1 of that following fiscal year. What is unknown, or what the impacts right now with all of the talks that are happening, is that the federal budget is not put into place until September. So decisions can be made that impact funding at our level after we have already approved our budget. So that's why I think those dates are very, very important just to pay attention to. And going into that, I'll start talking about federal funding. So titles, the funding title 1 through 5 or 1 through 4 is about 321,000. It supports our reading specialists, the salaries and benefits, some professional development, and then we are required to provide some allocations to non-public schools for title services. Typically, what we end up doing in the Title II and the Title IV is that we end up rolling that up into Title I. That is an allowable thing to do to support our reading specialists. So primarily our funding for title is supporting our reading specialists at the elementary level. We also have IDEA and access funding. Those funds support our special education budget. So you can see here that IDEA funding supports about 5.5% of our district special ed budget. Those funds are passed through and managed by the IU. Access funding supports about 3.1% of the district's special ed budget, and that includes supporting our ESY summer program. The big one is National School Breakfast and Lunch funding, because we are under the National School Lunch Program. This number, the reason the asterisk is there is that number is reflective of what we received from the federal government last year, because obviously this year is not complete. So we received about 435,000. The federal government, I don't know if a lot of people know or don't know, the federal government supports the bulk of National School Lunch Program. It supports about 97 to 98% of the free and reduced reimbursement and claim rates that we receive. So I thought that that was important to see with those numbers. One of the other highlights of that is that the food service fund is separate from the general fund. So it is a completely different fund. It has completely separate, different rules. It's not part of this process of approving the budget. It is a completely separate fund. On the state side, we receive different subsidies, we receive different grants, reimbursements. So I wanted to break out special education because we saw the special education funding on the federal side. So our special education subsidy, that along with the portion of the Social Security and retirement reimbursement that goes towards our special education teachers, that supports about 19.4% of our student services budget, our special education budget. Our other state subsidies and grants are about $8.8 million, and that goes and supports different aspects of our general operating budget. It supports about 14.6 of our overall general operating budget. The National School Lunch breakfast and lunch funding, we're at about 62,000. So you can see that if there's any impact to the federal National School Lunch Program funding and the states have to pick it up, they have to pick up a big bulk in order for that program to continue. Currently, Governor Shapiro has continued his efforts in providing free lunch for any students that qualify as reduced. and has continued his efforts with universal free breakfast. However, with those initiatives that happen, the amount of money that the state kicks in for that is not as significant as the federal government. So again, those numbers are reflective of 23 and 24. Dr. Yannicone, is there anything that you want to add to this slide before we move on to the next one?
I think we can go to the next one.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So there's been a lot of press about where funding is currently sitting both at the federal and the state level. So I just want to make sure that the committee is aware of the factors that we are paying attention to, many of which are undetermined at this point. So in our building of the budget for this year, Kara and I have worked to be very, very conservative in our use of these funds, and she'll explain that further as we move forward in the presentation. But currently, under the federal side, as Kara mentioned a few minutes ago, our Title I, II, III, and IV funding is overwhelmingly used for early literacy services at Enfield and Erdenheim. These are funding our reading specialists. Title III is for multilingual learner services, and that actually comes through a consortium through the IU. And so we do not currently anticipate a loss of funding in Titles 1 through 4 unless the federal government makes the decision to withhold funding for any number of reasons or to reduce funding. And we just don't know right now whether they're going to do that. The committee may or may not be fully aware of this week's decision. I know I've shared with the board. Governor Shapiro has made the decision and notified us through PDE that the certification request that came through the federal government and is currently due on April 24th. They have directed school districts that we are not to enter into any certification documentation, and that the state of Pennsylvania has notified the U.S. Department of Education that they believe we have met our obligation as a state with regard to confirming our commitment to state and federal laws, in particular Title VI, which is different than these titles. If we end up in a situation where the federal government makes the decision to withhold funding to the state of Pennsylvania, then obviously the numbers you saw on the previous slide could be, in theory, withheld from the state of Pennsylvania and therefore withheld from local school districts beginning in September. We don't know. It's also possible that there will be a court case that follows either through the federal government or through the state. And so there is some uncertainty with regard to funding for Titles 1 through 4. So Kara will explain to you shortly how we have factored that potential loss of funding. The one area that I really want to highlight under those title funds is the free and reduced lunch. So it is very important to us, and I'm sure it is very important to the board, that we continue to make sure that students who require subsidy in order to eat breakfast and lunch will do so. So we are keeping in mind the cost for universal free breakfast and for free lunch for the percentage of our students, which is somewhere in the ballpark of 22% of our students who receive that benefit. We are trying to keep that in mind so that if we were to have federal funding withheld or delayed as a result of a legal process, that we would be able to make sure that our students have what they needed to eat breakfast and lunch next year. In addition to that, the restructuring of the U.S. Department of Education has moved IDEA funding, which is our special education funding, out of the U.S. Department of Education and into the Department of Health and Human Services. So we don't currently know, will that be a benefit? Will that negatively impact the funding stream? Will it have no impact on the funding stream? So in our factoring of budget matters, Kara and I have tried to keep that in mind, that we're in flux right now with regard to any potential impact from these shifts. And then I already mentioned ESSER funding. We have fully utilized our ESSER funding on time We completed that use by September, and so no real impact for us with regard to the federal government, but did want to keep it on the slide because it's in the news, as there are other districts that did ask for extensions and are negative. At the state level, the Act 1 index peaked this year at 5.3% last July 1, and is declining, is projected to decline every year thereafter. So this year, as you know, the Act 1 index is at 4.0, and then it moves into the threes over the next few years. So one of the things we're thinking about in long-term financial planning is the declining ability to levy taxes in order to fund the budget. In addition to that, our district is considered to be among the wealthiest districts in the state of Pennsylvania, with one of the most stable financial outlooks. And so the state funding trend has been to reallocate under fair funding allocations, to reallocate funding from wealthier districts to districts that, through the fair funding lawsuit, have been identified as historically underfunded. And so we have seen a reduction in our state allocation this year, which we did explain at a recent finance meeting. So essentially, in addition to the uncertainty at the federal level, we're also seeing a reduction in our ability to levy taxes and the allocations from the state to Springfield in our state funding allocation. And then finally, and we're hoping that this is going to be good news, but it's currently undetermined, there is discussion at the state level with regard to cyber charter reform. There's strong interest, bipartisan interest, in cyber charter reform, but we haven't yet seen it. Currently, Springfield Township pays roughly $685,000 for students who are enrolled in cyber charter schools. That is a significant number. And the break we were given was about $35,000. So the current cyber charter reform is frankly woefully inadequate with regard to what we're paying for cyber charter. And the primary reason for a strong interest, bipartisan interest in cyber charter reform is that cyber charters are not only for profit, but they do not have the operations and facilities related expenses that brick and mortar school districts have. And so we are optimistic, hopeful that the state of Pennsylvania will enact genuine cyber charter reform this year. The ask is that they will redistribute the funding and reassign the funding so that there is one universal expense of approximately $8,000 per student, rather than the current system, which is to take the per pupil allocation district by district, and regardless of which cyber charter school a student is enrolled in, to differentially assign the cost of tuition to match the per pupil expenditure rather than the actual cost of educating a child through the cyber charter system. So we are optimistic and hopeful that this bipartisan effort will yield financial benefit to the district, but we just don't know yet, and we probably won't know till later in the summer. Are there any questions about the current state of the federal or state education funding?
Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks, Dr. Yannicone.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to get into the meat of numbers. You know, we came with a first look budget. It was a 4% proposed tax increase. We always go back and sharpen our pencils. So we're looking at anticipated expenditures of almost $76 million with anticipated revenues of almost $75 million. So right now we have a difference supplemented from our fund balance at about $975,000. I will show you the differences and where we've come down in some of our expenditures and where we've raised some of our revenues. This is a slide that you all are well versed with. This shows the Act 1 index history, our tax increase history, and our aid ratio, which Dr. Yannicone touched upon about, which measures the wealth of our district. It also, I'll go back. Sorry, I have a little thing here. I was going to go back, but it also shows the declining projections for the Act One index, which we have talked about the last few budget presentations. So we're going to take a look at our revenues, and we're going to look at all the different aspects of the different budgets that we've looked at. So in this format, you see the approved budget for this current year, the proposed budget that was our first look budget that we presented back in March. And we were at $74.6 million in asks. The proposed final budget, we're a little bit higher than that. We netted, based upon some information that we have, and comfortability of where we're going and conservative moving with federal and state funding, we're at a net increase of about $190,000. So we'll get into where those net increases came from. I want to show you that one slide collectively. And then on the expenditure side, the first look at budget, we were at about 76.3 million. We've been able to sharpen some pencils in a couple of areas to bring that down to about 75.8 million. So we had a net decrease in our expenditure ask of about $518,000. And what were the changes to the budget assumptions, or what got us here? So on the revenue side, on state funding, as you all know, I go very conservative, so I always adjust to the allocations of the current year that we're in. So those adjustments on basic ed, transportation, our Plan Con reimbursement, and then our health and safety grant that is filtered through the state that has indication that we will be receiving that again. That was not, these things were not in first look budget, so I was able to adjust those to garner some additional funding at the state level. At the federal funding level, just with everything that Dr. Yannicone just spoke about and I just spoke about as far as kind of the climate in federal funding and things that we've been hearing, we are being very conservative and anticipating a reduction in Title I funds, and we reduced that by 25%. So that was a decrease in funding of about $72,000. The offset of that has been picked up by the general fund. So we were still supporting our reading specialist 100%. It's just that the allocation of where that money goes to support their salaries and benefits is being shifted in our revenue budget. And then we are completely reducing Title II and Title IV to zero. So that is about $151,000 impact to our revenue budget. Even though we have those reductions, and again, there has been no mandate, there has been nothing said that that is definitely happening, but we want to be conservative and we want to prepare so that we're not scrambling around to try to find funds to make up for these because we're anticipating on getting them fully. So in the event that they are fully funded, that money will come back into the budget, and it'll go towards reducing our use on fund balance even more. But with all that said, we had a net increase of $190,000 on our revenue side. On our expenditure side, we had a total decrease of $518,000. We had some attritional savings after I scrubbed the salary and benefits budget a little bit more. On the department side, it was a decrease of about $150,000. You saw in the budget slide what the curriculum department is doing this year. They had a heavy lift between the last 2 years of implementing curriculum. So there's a continuation of those, the prior and current year of curriculum initiatives. So there's no major replacement that's on the books for this year. There's also a different way that we are recognizing multi-year expenditures. So if we get a 8-year license, instead of recognizing that whole thing in the year that we purchase, we are actually, while we are purchasing it all at once, we are recognizing it each year based on the year that it's used. So that's proper revenue expenditure recognition. So that changes the need to put $1 million into a budget. And it stops the flux of budgets from going up and down, and they can be a little bit more stable, and we can do a better job of having recycle and replacement budgets that are happening within the district. So that garnered a savings of about $150,000, and then debt service was a big chunk of that. It was a little bit over half. indicated earlier in a previous slide that we had about 123,000 and some change of savings from our 25 series. And then looking back over what was originally put in the first look, we had a refunding of our 2016 series. So we put that in place, and we actually ended that, our last payment for the 2016 portion that we did not refund this year. So there's no more payments on that 2016 series. It's been totally wrapped up in a refunding. So that was able to reduce the overall debt service of about 293,000. So what that does, where we applied that, it was a net change of about a $708,000 between the two. And it reduced the impact on fund balance from about 1.7 million down to 974,000 and some change. Any questions on that? Okay. So the tax.
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button there. No questions, I think. And Dr. Yannicone, no questions on your overview of the federal changes either, because you guys are being so comprehensive in this review. I think one of the things that I love about the budgeting process is it requires so many looks. And so, for anyone who's reviewing these recordings, I think I would review all of them in succession because you guys are doing such a great job of lining up the detail of the change in each round. And I think there's nothing but good news on these budget assumption changes here. So it's great to see. Obviously, the impact of the debt service is material. It's great to see that you're combing through the department budgets to make sure that we are as efficient as possible. And I think this is going to send the right signals to the future bond rating groups that are looking at our strength, because you are helping to close the gap on the expenditures to revenue. So yeah, no questions.
Thank you. We looked at this the last presentation, but I just wanted to highlight that we built this budget with a 4% tax increase. We got about a little over $2 million of new revenue generated from that. And you'll see the new numbers that the impact based upon the previous slide, fund balance is 900 and about $75,000. You'll see the impact on the median homeowner monthly is about almost $20, a little less than $20, and annually it's $200 and about $39. These amounts are exclusive of approved homestead farmstead credits. For any eligible properties that have that. That is the money that comes through the gambling money. That is a different fund in the state budget, and it passes through every year. It's certified. That certification does not happen until May 1st, so I do not know what that number is right now, but that number will definitely be coming before final budget is approved. So I'll be able to make sure that I highlight that in a future presentation, or it'll be included in the next budget approval. And then I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Yannicone so she can speak about what the 25-26 budget is supporting in our district.
Thanks, Kara. So as we mentioned earlier, the bulk of the budget, about 85% of the budget, comes to paying for the staff that work for us. And we don't feel like there's anything else more important than hiring great people and paying them a competitive wage. And certainly in the current environment of teacher shortages and staffing shortages and bus driver shortages, we've really worked this year in negotiating 3 of our 4 contracts to continue to have competitive salary and benefits packages. We've looked at the county average and attempted to be very competitive at the high end of the county average. And so we're in year 3 of the STEA contract. That's all of our teachers, school counselors, all of our support services in those areas within the STEA membership. And so we're looking at a little over 1.3 million for this year's additions to salary and benefits. We negotiated all the other 3 contracts this year. The STESPA contract we've spoken about previously, and so we have a very competitive package, and that's going to cost us a little over $700,000. The Act 93 agreement is a smaller number of staff members. That's all of our administrators. And so we negotiated a new contract with them. That's going to cost us just under $160,000. And then this is hot off the presses as of Wednesday. We have an agreement with our confidential group, and we'll be bringing that forward to the board on April 22nd. That's a small group of 9 members of our team. And so those increases in the first year will be just over $36,000. But that's the bulk of the increase in our budget for next year, the combination of these salary and benefits packages. In addition to that, we have several new positions. The first is that we're ready for the strings program to expand to the middle and high school. We're excited about that. But we are able to neutrally fund that. As I mentioned earlier, with regard to maximizing efficiencies, we have 2 retirements of health and physical education teachers at the middle school, and we believe we're able to condense that to 1 new position. And so we'll have 2 health and phys ed teachers instead of 3 at the middle school next year, and that will help us to fund the expansion of the strings program. In addition, for 7 years, we've had a Relay for Life advisor who's been volunteer, and we feel it's appropriate to pay that person a stipend. So we've added a small stipend for the Relay for Life advisor. Our volleyball program was very successful this year, and we are ready to add a full JV program. And so we need a JV coach. So that's that position. And wrestling, the PIAA approved female wrestling as a standalone sport. And so we're ready to offer a 3rd coaching position. And so we'll continue to train co-ed, but when our female team goes to compete, they will be able to have a singular coach with them. And so we have a 3rd wrestling coach on the docket for an addition. And then under technology, I really have to recognize and praise Brandon Lutz and Kara for getting ahead of the tariff threat, in particular currently with regard to the relationship with China. And so they were able to finalize a multi-year lease for Chromebooks. And we decided, because this year was supposed to be the high school or the middle school, and next year the high school, we made the decision that we were going to purchase them all now, or lease them all now. And that way we'll be well ahead of any tariff concerns for the next 18 months. And so we have a commitment on a price. The Chromebooks have actually already arrived. And so they will get configured over the next 5 months and be ready for students in the fall. So we're very happy with those savings and having the continued use of a current fully functional Chromebook in our one-to-one initiative for the middle and high school. We'll be moving into year 4 of the cybersecurity plan, and I think the Power School situation earlier this year highlighted how important it is that we have strong cybersecurity measures in place. We also are looking at, there is a reduction at the federal level and an elimination of a particular cybersecurity system, and our Assistant Director, Matt Sneed, is looking at a mitigation effort for us at the local level to replace what is being lost at the federal. And then the other 2 technology items are planned. We hope we will be able to receive E-rate funding, but E-rate funding is a federal program, and that is currently in flux. So we're planning for the improvement of the infrastructure. These are things that we definitely need to do. But we are hoping that we're going to receive 50% of the funding through E-rate. So again, that's another question mark for us as the federal government reallocates resources. Same thing with the Zoom phone upgrade. If we needed to, we could delay that Zoom phone upgrade if federal dollars don't come through. So we'll see. And then we're going to get into great detail about the middle school renovation and addition project, phase 2 of the financing, and then also the 5-year operational and capital plan at our April 29th property committee. But all of those items are factored into this year's budget. Are there any questions?
I have a question. I just also want to echo what was said of just how incredibly clear and detailed this is, and just the right amount of detail, not too much in the weeds, but enough to feel really knowledgeable about what's happening. And I had 2 questions just in terms of kind of other sources of funding in the future. I was curious if you could comment a little bit about how the budgeting process is then communicated to our commissioners in the township and kind of what the planning for generating income from businesses or kind of any planning or strategy on their part to continue to generate resources for our community that goes into the schools. And then the second part of it was also for the, I know that parent associations are mostly raising money kind of for events and teachers, but I do remember under the previous superintendent, there was an ask, for example, to the EHSP to help raise more money towards the playground, if I'm correct. And I'm just curious if there's any kind of planning or conversations with the parent groups about needs in the future, should there be significant changes. I know everything is still feeling generally positive, but just curious about those two income sources.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. Sorry, I appreciate the questions. With regard to township communication, we present this publicly, and I believe the township does pay close attention to where the district's funding is coming from, but we really don't have a partnership with regard to additional funding sources or funding sources through businesses. We do have, I think, a growing, robust education foundation. And just this week, I had a meeting with them, and they have approved, it's just over $48,000 in donations to the district this month. And so they are going to be supporting in areas where they have really shown an interest. So just under $25,000 for the music program. They're going, and the remainder of it is distributed across all the schools for STEM initiatives, a television studio at the middle school, for example, STEM materials at Enfield. And then we're adding sense of belonging. They're going to be funding a new mentoring program for 9th grade students at the high school. They're going to continue to fund high school scholarships. And so that was a terrific meeting I had with the Ed Foundation on Wednesday, and they voted unanimously to allocate those resources. And so we're happy about that. And with regard to the secondary HSP and the EEHSP, they have been very generous in funding a lot of our curricular visiting authors and visiting artists, which is a fantastic program that I think really benefits our students. I was able very recently to attend Audrey Vernick's presentation at Erdenheim, where she was teaching the students about the writing process and how to be a creative writer and a more refined writer. And students were very attentive to that. I was there for her 4th grade presentation. So the EEHSP and the secondary HSP continue to provide us support. I think that their fundraising resources are more limited than the Education Foundation. But in previous years, they've purchased new tables for us in the cafeteria at Erdenheim, and they continue to provide supports. For example, we looked at, for indoor recess, different games and activities for students. And they've been wonderful at providing us donations in that area, purchasing new games. And so, yes, we continue to have resources. But there is no doubt, I don't want to be too optimistic, there is no doubt that if the federal government's resources are removed for any number of reasons, it will have an impact on our ability to get out of deficit spending. So we'll continue to need to rely on the funding budget if we want to continue to offer all of the programming and the current class size balance that we have in all of our schools. But we'll continue to keep an eye on it, and we will bring any concerns forward to the board as they occur. I think the next 6 months will be telling for us in where our federal dollars and our state dollars are going to land.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions before we move forward? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Unicone. I just wanted to highlight too, under the facilities, in case there was a question, because we're talking about potential tariffs. That question came up immediately for me when I heard talk of tariffs on how, if and how that could impact the bids that we received for our middle school project. And also subsequent to that, the furniture that we're getting for the areas within that building. So I have to give credit to Doug Taylor, who CHA wrote the specs for our bids, and they put strong language in there that the contractors cannot come back to us with increased pricing tariffs, anything. They have to go by the numbers that are in the contract. So there, we won't see big fluxes. I can't talk about, how it'll impact in other areas as far as if there's delays in receiving materials, but we don't think that that will happen because we got ahead of it by, approving and issuing notice to awards to all the contractors. So they were able to start their procurements in February. So we don't have any concerns at this point about any of the tariff talks impacting that project. And then working with the furniture company, I asked that question just the other day. Will this have impact on our pricing and what does this look like? And we have protected pricing. So we are very strong on both of those fronts. So I just wanted to make sure that I relayed that. Okay, so the budget history, I think this is a very impactful slide because it kind of shows the history of approved budget, where we actually land, where our fund balance is. And again, it gives another snapshot or illustration of the Act 1 index and where the district has landed. So you'll see that on the top, the very top, and you'll see it's in red, that over the last few years, we have been addressing trying to reduce that dependency on fund balance. So each budget year, we are trying to bring that down. This current year, we were at about 730. I anticipate that we will be very close to that number, if not less. This year, we tried really, really hard to get at that point or below. But just with everything that's happening and some of the uncertainty, we weren't able to bring it quite down that low, but I'm very happy that we were able to bring it under $1 million. So I think from first look to proposed final, I think we did a lot of work, and departments and everybody alike contributed in looking at their budgets again and finding some cost savings within those budgets with efficiencies. So I applaud our team on working diligently and hard to make sure that we're still addressing bringing the fund balance down. You'll see where we landed in our last couple of audits. You'll see that that number has come down relative to where we projected. You'll see the big asterisks on 23, 24. We talked about this last meeting, and it is in red on the very bottom. That is our Carson Valley. So hopefully never to say the words Carson Valley again in any of my budget presentations. But that is what caused the flux in our 23, 24. Carson Valley closed in June. Working with our auditor, we wrote off all anticipated or things that we were carrying as far as collecting from the different schools on tuition. I have not given up hope that we are still looking to try to collect some of those money back or get it. But again, with uncertainties that are happening in other areas, it's kind of taking away from that importance. But we will continue and be diligent to try to see if we can still work with PDE and do everything we can to get those funds back. But I just wanted to highlight seeing that big flux from 22, 23 to 23, 24. That amount was inclusive of writing off the entire balance of Carson Valley. Any questions?
How much of that, the delta between 23 and 24, was driven by that Carson Valley one-time charge?
I believe, if I remember correctly, it was half. It was over half.
Okay.
And then in 22, 23, there were some write-offs for Carson Valley too. So that was inclusive of some Carson Valley write-offs. So we're heading, if you take Carson Valley out of the equation, our numbers look great. Unfortunately, we can't do that. So I do want to highlight that. And I believe if I'm going back now, it's 1.6 is what was the special losses on our financial statements for 23, 24.
Well, I know this chart is already chock full of data, but it wouldn't be outrageous to add another line, which is essentially excluding one-time charges associated with Carson Valley.
Sure.
to demonstrate like our operating budget and operating philosophy as we get to try and balance the budget is on the right track. So just one line underneath the surplus deficit that would exclude Carson Valley and just be explicit about that. I think it'll be helpful for the public.
I think it's a great idea. Okay, and just the next couple of slides is just wrapping up with timing and budget planning. So what are next steps? What remains to be decided by the board? This is the proposed final budget that will be presented at the April 22nd regular board meeting for approval. We have the 4% proposed tax increase, about 75.8 million in expenditures, using about 975,000 in fund balance allocation. At that approval, we still have a 30-day public posting. That is a requirement of PDE, and review of the 25-26 proposed final budget, with the anticipation that we will come back to the board on June 3rd without any anticipated changes from what you're seeing today, for that approval. In the event that something happens, we do have an extra board meeting that if we needed some more time and we needed to have another finance committee meeting because these numbers change significantly, which I don't anticipate. I think we were very conservative. We've addressed things that are out there as far as the funding. So I don't anticipate that, but we do have that cushion just in case it's needed. But that is what is left to be decided by the board. And then the budget process timeline, that is just a reiteration of what we have left to happen with the board and approvals and meetings. Any questions on those?
Just a procedural reminder. So we'll review the budget, this exact presentation you'll present in our next board meeting later this month. And then there is a 1-month period, plus minus, where we'll get a little bit of final information plus any feedback or input, and then we will vote June 3rd.
That is correct. That is the plan as of right now. And we do have the ability, because we have to approve our budget by June 30th. There is another board meeting in June in case we need it.
Great. Okay, that's helpful.
Okay, and then the final agenda item, and this is why Chief Lesniak, if he's still online, this is why he is here. We've had a few discussions with Chief Lesniak. This request came last year, but we hadn't implemented a property tax rebate program, for our residents. So we wanted to see how, kind of get that up and running and get it where it needed to be. We mirrored the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue rebate program and we matched 100%. There are other districts out there that don't match up to the 100%. There are a couple that do, others do different amounts. As I anticipated, and this is what I was warned of by, my peers in Montgomery County, when you first get this kicked off, there's minimal participation. So one of the things that I am working with Jolene on, she is our tax collector, is to collaborate with her on marketing through a tax flyer, through a little postcard, just more information so that taxpayers are aware to apply and to make sure that they apply for the Pennsylvania rebate, because if they're eligible for that, then they're eligible for the rebate on our end. So I want to collaborate with her, and then I want to increase our marketing through our website and newsletters and just trying to get the information out as much as possible. So with that, the conversations that we've had with Chief Lesniak is that the county has implemented a volunteer emergency services property tax rebate program. There are several districts that are looking to implement this for the 25-26 school year. The majority of Montgomery County do have local property tax rebate program, and now it is transcending into the voluntary emergency services program. So one of the things that I think the county did a great job of doing with, kind of their marketing with this is just why the volunteer emergency services and why not our paid police officers, our paid firefighters, our paid EMS, is because it's recognizing the need to encourage and support the invaluable time and commitment provided by these individuals, because it is on a volunteer basis. After speaking to Chief Lesniak, I had no idea of the stringent requirements that are that people have to put in for volunteer. It's tracked. They have to meet certain hour requirements, and the county has translated that into a point system. So there is a very comprehensive, as Chief Lesniak has told me, if you weren't familiar with Excel before this process, they are now very well versed in Excel, because this is how they have to track. And that is part of the county's program, is that information has to be certified by the fire company leadership, and it has to identify that people met the requirements through this point system of their volunteer hours and the things that they have to do in order to even be a volunteer fire or emergency services provider. So what my recommendation is on looking at implementing this the first year is to mirror the concept of the county program. It's on a point system. The change that I am recommending, and this is, again, we need to see how this impacts budget. When we talked to Chief Lesniak, he said there are about 85 there are people eligible in the township that could be volunteer fire emergency services providers. That does not mean that there's 85 people that are volunteers because they have to meet the requirements of the volunteer hours, which I said is very extensive. And not to put him on the spot, but I can have him speak more on that if there are questions to that. But what I'd like to recommend is that we still use the maximum tax rebate that the state offers, which is $1,000. And then based on the point system that the county has implemented, based on them meeting their requirements, that is the percentage that they will get of the $1,000 up to a max of $1,000. So if they have X number of points, say they have 50 points, that translates into 25% of the $1,000 of the rebate. That's how that would be allocated. So for it, it supports the long-term sustainability of the Springfield Township's fire companies with the volunteers. And then our next steps would be resolutions to approve the implementation of each of these programs again, because it's an annual implementation at the June 3rd meeting when we are approving the final budget.
Kara, quick question on this.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
last year when we first discussed expanding doing the local program mirroring what the state does, you had talked about a anticipated impact of about $30,000 to $40,000.
Correct.
And so, like, what do we know what the impact of this might be? I mean, I know you went through the numbers, but just to have a clean, and I apologize if I missed it. I'm just.
No, that's okay. So, again, in our discussions with Chief Lesniak, that was one of my first questions. How many people were we talking about? Do you have any idea? And so
To the 85.
yes, he relayed is that there's 85 people in the township eligible in any given year and obviously that number is going to change because commitments change.
Right.
So if we looked at 85% and all 85 completed,
Go up to 85,000.
yes, it could be
Okay.
up to 85,000, but based on my conversation with Chief Lesniak, we're not going to hit that number. We do not believe that 85 people will hit every single points to get the $1,000. There might be some levels, and it's not going to be 85 every year.
Okay.
And if Chief Lesniak is on, if I'm misspeaking, please correct me.
Good morning, Ms. Green. Yes, thank you for even considering this program for us. And you summarized the existing county tax rebate program to a T with the amount of documentation and activities required. And there are 85 members of the 3 volunteer fire companies in Springfield Township who would be eligible for the program. But as Ms. Green said, that depending on the commitment and availability and life changes, not everybody's going. I wouldn't expect that everybody would hit the 100%. Would we like that? Sure. And I believe that during one of our conversations with Ms. Green, she offered to get us like hundreds of more volunteers through this program, which we would be very thankful for. But right now, currently, the maximum that you would have would be 85 members in Springfield Township.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's great. This program sounds excellent to me. I just wanted to make sure. I like to save the numbers in my notes. So thank you for going back over that.
Thank you. I am going to clarify when we sat down, the question I had, as I always want to make sure I understand the financial expectation is, are we talking about hundreds of people? And so he said, I wish. And we'd love to get to where you're talking about. So thank you, Chief Lesniak.
Again, thank you for your opportunity to consider this program.
Yeah. And hopefully, I mean, I understand just from hearing things in the past that there may have been recruiting issues. I don't know if that's currently the case, but hopefully with advertising, this and the other program, it helps, motivate people to continue to support the community through their volunteer service with the fire departments.
Yes, we could always use more members, whether they're members who are going to go through the full training and assist with fighting fires, or even doing administrative tasks or, maintenance around the station and the equipment. So anybody who's listening who's interested in potentially volunteering with one of the fire companies, please feel free to stop by each firehouse on Monday evening around 7 o'clock and see what we do, talk to our members, and grab an application.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this slide? No? Okay, that is the
Great.
end.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you being here.
Okay, I am gonna stop sharing. That stop sharing, yes. Okay, that concludes our meeting for today. So I just want to recap because there's a couple of items that will be coming out of this committee for not only the April 22nd, but the June 3rd. So the April 22nd meeting, we will have the approval of the purchase of the 2 buses. We will also have the approval of the proposed final budget at the April 22nd meeting. And then at the June 3rd meeting, barring any changes or major changes in the climate of education funding, we anticipate of having at the June 3rd meeting, the final budget proposal adopted and the 2 resolutions supporting the local property tax rebate programs that were presented today. Are there any issues with those items coming out of this meeting or any questions? No?
No questions, no issues. Thank you.
Well, I thank you all for your attention because it was a lot of information. This was very data packed and it was heavy with a lot of information. So thank you for your attention. We got done under an hour and a half, so I'm very happy about that because it was a lot of information. As always, our student reps are here. Any questions or comments? I know it's a lot of info coming at you guys.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Good too. Thank you so much.
And as always, thank you for participating. We appreciate your student voice in this. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to conclude the Finance Committee. All right, everybody have a great day and thank you again for your time and attention.
Thanks for everything.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.